It was a winning effort last week from the Colts over America's team, but they didn't really need Carson Wentz to do much in the game thanks to Jonathan Taylor. Wentz ended the game with just north of 7 DK fantasy points. They now have a much tougher matchup in Buffalo. So chase or fade for me here, Reid, that Wentz will have to be a lot of a more active here in the passing game versus the Bills and will score 20-plus fantasy points this week.
Wow. That's a lot there. I'm going to fade that he scores 20-plus fantasy points. I'm going to chase that he does need to play a little bit better and more than he did last week. But you take a look at the Buffalo Bills and how much points they've given up to opposing quarterbacks in terms of DK fantasy points, dead last, around 12 points. So even if he tries to do more, it might be a failing effort. I think you got to lean, even though Buffalo is strong against the run, their defense is strong. I think you got to lean on Jonathan Taylor. From a DFS standpoint, like we'll get to that in a little bit, what I think of him, but I'm not buying in Carson Wentz, especially at that price. If I'm going anywhere else around where he's priced, Tua Tagovailoa is probably the place that I want to go towards, as opposed to Carson Wentz. I don't trust it. And Justin Fields, as much as I love the guy, I don't really see it this week. So I'd probably be out on those guys, in on Tua, and then fading that Carson Wentz is going to get above 20 points.
Okay, Geoff, Wentz was on fire before that 7.1 point stinker in last week's win over the Jags.
Was he on fire? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
I'm taking a look at his player card.
52% completion percentage against Tennessee 3 weeks ago. You nailed it off the start of this segment. The Colts didn't need Carson Wentz to do much. That's the Colts' whole MO. If they need Carson Wentz to do stuff, they're in big trouble, because even in good fantasy spots, this guy doesn't really produce much. I mean, he's got a season high of 26.58. That was in the wild game against Baltimore that also included overtime. I love our producers, but like Carson Wentz against Buffalo, Reid laid it out. This is a Buffalo team who's allowed multiple touchdowns only like twice in the whole year. They haven't allowed 3 touchdown passes once the entire season. And you've got Carson Wentz coming in. No, this is not a spot for fantasy. I don't care like how galaxy brain, how out there you get this week when you're making creative lineups. You know, if it's like 4 a.m. and you're like, oh, maybe Carson Wentz against the, even that scenario, I don't think you're going to put Carson Wentz in lineups. It's just not a good spot. Reid mentioned Tua. We should be talking about Cam Newton in this spot. That's the real spot.
Chill out, pal.
As you know, Emerson, because he's going to go off this week.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we'll get to
4
that.
a.m. Yeah, go to bed, man.
Yeah, for real. Pearce, what do you think? Chase surveyed that he'll go north of 20 DK fantasy points, which he did in the 3 previous games before this past weekend.
First of all, I got to fade Geoff Ulrich throwing the producers under the bus.
Yeah, that's terrible. Glennon, wow. Tom Glennon in my ear right now, and he's a pretty even kill dude. He is raging in the back.
I will chase that he needs to be active or can be active, but I don't think he'll be effective, not against this Buffalo defense. It's too strong. I don't see him putting up any points. And I also don't believe that Indianapolis is really going to want to lean on Carson Wentz that much in this game. If he has to be active and pass a lot, then they've lost. The only way they win, as these guys have already mentioned, is if Jonathan Taylor has a pretty good game and their defense somehow is able to control Buffalo's offense. That's a big, tough ask right there. I don't see it happening. Carson Wentz has had a pretty good season. We got to give him some credit. He's performed better than what we expected, especially coming out of the preseason with the injuries. But this is not the week.
Geoff, I will give you credit for bringing out some emotion in the typically emotionless producer, Tom. But it did take just 2 weeks for Christian McCaffrey to warm up after missing 5 weeks with an injury, as he scored north of 26 DK fantasy points last week in a win over Arizona. He is the highest priced player on the slate in week 11, $8,900 in a matchup against a Washington defense without Chase Young now. He's out with that torn ACL. So chase or fade that CMC has his best fantasy outing of the season, which his highest up to this point has been just under 28 fantasy points. That's this Sunday. Geoff.
I'll fade it. I mean, I do think it's a good spot. And like I said, I do expect Carolina to potentially roll here against Washington, who's probably going to be getting like a little bit overvalued coming off their biggest win of the season. But that was essentially their Super Bowl. I mean, this is still a team without their best defensive player. I fade that McCaffrey's going to have like his best game of the year, just on the fact that now we've got Cam Newton there, who we know what Cam Newton does. He steals red zone touches from running backs. McCaffrey had 10 targets last week. Is he going to get 10 targets with Cam Newton at quarterback? I think that's far less likely scenario, just because Cam, instead of dumping it off, will just take off himself as well. You've got a game script where maybe McCaffrey gets a few more carries, but again, probably going to lose out on the red zone touches. So I think his touchdown probability goes down in this spot. His carries should be up, and it may be a good spot for some garbage time like rushing, but I just don't think it's necessarily as good a ceiling spot as maybe even like last week.
Yeah, Pearce, his carries have increased, just his touches overall the past 2 weeks, 18 in week 9 and then 23 last week.
Well, I'm going to fade this. I mean, volume's one thing, but what kind of volume is he going to get? And Geoff alluded to the fact that Cam Newton will likely poach some of those touchdowns. There's a chance here for CMC to get 1 touchdown maybe, but 2 touchdowns, 3 touchdowns, that's asking too much. And yeah, the volume has increased, but the problem coming into this season, the problem that's plagued the Panthers for the last several seasons, is offensive line play. Their offensive line is not very good, and their offensive line is pretty much completely injured. So he might get volume, but it's behind a bad offensive line. One thing that Washington does pretty well is stopping the run. And if anyone is going to be able to stop Christian McCaffrey and Cam Newton, it might be their former coach in Ron Rivera. This is probably not where I'm going to go.
Hey, Reid, chase your fade for me. Christian McCaffrey has his best fantasy outing of the season this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be 3 for 3. And voice of reason, thank you, Pearce, about Carolina, and talk about Washington getting a lot of positive publicity. I mean, Cam Newton and the Carolina Panthers all of a sudden are a good team. And Pearce laid it out perfectly about this offensive line. You just I just don't trust it at all, right? It's not changed since Sam Darnold has left the building, respectively, right? I don't get it. You like Christian McCaffrey from the standpoint that he's usually $10,000. So now he's $8,900. I think he's a better play than Jonathan Taylor, just because I think Cam is going to have to rely, and the Panthers are going to have to rely on CMC. What I do like for CMC though is his longest reception and maybe longest rush. His longest rush is over 15.5 at -105 in the DK Sportsbook. If the defense is going to have to worry about 2 backs, right, in Cam Newton and Christian McCaffrey, you could get maybe a little bit more one-on-one type of situation. And his 16.5 longest reception at -115, those are things that I like a lot more than potentially leaning on Christian McCaffrey, even though he's got you 27 carries and 14 catches. I think he has to get up to that 8-9 catch to get to the 26-28 landmark. I don't think that's happening this week.
And our friendly wager is you and I have the Washington football team and the points, and Geoff takes Carolina. Loser will send the winner dog toys for his dog.
The largest tennis ball known to man is coming to you and I.
Our group chat is getting a little out of hand right now. There's no doubt about it. Pearce, after a scorching start here to his NFL career, Bengals rookie wide receiver Jamar Chase has just 81 yards combined his last 2 games. Since he travels to Vegas for Week 11, take on a Raiders team that just gave up 516 total yards to the Chiefs. Oh my gosh, Reid. Chase or fade that Chase rebounds this week with a 20-plus fantasy point game versus the Raiders, Pearce.
Chase. I mentioned earlier this week, it's kind of intriguing to bet him as MVP this season. You get some pretty good payout. And now, I know, he's not a quarterback, and you can't give the MVP to a rookie. It's 2021. We've seen everything happen this season. We've seen all kinds of unpredictable moments. Why not take a long shot on Chase? We've seen his upside. He gets on a heater to close out the season. You never know. It could happen. And he should be fine. I know that he didn't play well in the last game against Cleveland. That was more so Cleveland just had a good game. It happens. He's a rookie. He's not going to be on fire every single game. The Jets game, I'm just going to write that off. That was a strange game script. He'll be fine. 22nd pass DVOA. 20 points is not asking much from a guy that can get almost 20 points in one play. I will Chase.
Reid, you chasing Chase? Sorry, dude.
Yeah, and his matchup is against Faison, who's given up 17 receptions on 28 targets, 107 passer rating when targeted, over 13.6 yards per reception. Yeah, you look at this defense with the Raiders and their cover 3. It doesn't work against really fast and skillful receivers. So, yeah, I'm going to Chase.
All right, Ulrich, how about you, man?
Yeah, I think the Bengals, just as a team, are getting ready to just put one on the Raiders here. I mean, this is a Raiders team who, over the last 3 games, have averaged less than 2 sacks per game now. Their yards per attempt against is going up. It's just their defense just isn't playing as good. I mean, you can make the argument that maybe Casey Hayward in the back shuts down Chase, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I like Joe Mixon's upside a lot, and I like Jamar Chase for a bounce back game here too. I think stacking the Bengals in Week 11 could be very profitable.
Fowler, last question here, guys. Got less than 3 minutes to go in the show. After averaging about 10 targets a game in his 3 previous matchups, Lions tight end TJ Hawkinson had just 1 target last Sunday, and the Lions 16-16, thrilling tie with Pittsburgh. He actually ended up with more penalties, too, than targets in the game. So Detroit continues their search for their first win of the season this week in Cleveland. Browns giving up 2 touchdowns to Hunter Henry in their blowout loss to the Pats last week. So chase your fade for me here. Hawkinson once again becomes featured in the Lions offense and picks up at least 10 targets this week. Gosh, that's a lot.
10 targets? No. Who's the quarterback? Who's going to be the quarterback? I have no idea.
That's a great question.
So maybe he gets 10 targets, but I'm going to another tight end right around him because I don't want to spend time with TJ Hawkinson, even though he's great. I think he's a solid player, but it's a world of hurt in Detroit. Give me Mike Gesicki. He's $500 cheaper. He gets the Jets. He ran routes on 81%, even though he also got a goose egg last week. He's got the route participation that's elite. So give me Gesicki over to Hawkinson. I just don't know who the quarterback is.
Okay. Ulrich, where are you going?
Yeah, I like the idea of paying up for Hawkinson or Gesicki. They're both low sentiment targets coming off, really bad weeks. I think Gesicki's the better target. I think Hawkinson could be in a spot. I mean, Jared Goff does not want to sit back there and throw it downfield. He could see 10-plus targets again. I think it's a bounce-back spot for Hawkinson, but I prefer Gesicki. And the nice thing about both those guys, if you pay up for them, they should be under 8% owned in GPPs, maybe even less. Still good upside for Hawkinson, just a very boomer-bust player.
Yeah. Both on the road, both right next to each other, too, here. I'm looking at the tight end salaries, 5.7 for Hawkinson and 5.2 for Gesicki. Pearce, bring us home here, dude.
Fade it. Dan Campbell took over the play calling last week, and DeAndre Swift got 33 carries. One thing I do want to mention, Google TJ Hawkinson's rookie picture versus his picture this season, and you'll see what Detroit does to people. Just look at it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at it here. He had 11 targets in Week 8, had 11 targets in
Motor
Week
City,
6.
man.
Yeah.
I want to see Jared Goff. If Jared Goff is there for another year, I want to see what his baby face looks like after.